Hello and welcome to an especially wintry edition of the Guardian Film Show right before Christmas. For some, of course, this is a time of jubilant alcohol-fueled revelry. For others, though, it brings a sense of loss, regret and creeping existential despair. Fortunately, the week's films provide for all dispositions. Coming up like a flower.
Clean out your bedroom.
Oh boy.
Tina Fey and Amy Poehler throw the mother of all parties in Sisters.
We cannot have a party.
You've been divorced 2 years. You can't avoid putting yourself out there forever.
So where have you been all this time?
Peter Mullen sets out in search of hostel or home as Hector.
Pussies. Whatever.
And Canadian director Guy Maddin opens the variety pack of filmic delights in The Forbidden Room, although obviously watch out for the marzipan.
Hello, I'm Marv. Today we're going to discuss baths.
But it's important at Christmas to consider those less fortunate than ourselves. Angelina Jolie Pitt's new film, for instance, draws our attention to the plight of two beautiful millionaires adrift on the sun-splashed Mediterranean coast. And there, but for the grace of God, go us all. Roland and Vanessa are a modish 1970s couple whose marriage is in freefall. They're drifting in a convertible by the sea. They're bouncing off the walls of a luxury hotel suite. The honeymooning couple next door may just provide the catalyst these two lost souls need to turn their sad and sorry lives around. Joined now by The Guardian's own bickering married couple, Peter Bradshaw and Henry Barnes. Peter, these two, they're, for better or worse, they're really inviting the critical brickbacks with this one, aren't they?
Yeah, I was sort of hoping this might be a sequel to Mr. and Mrs. Smith, especially when they come into the French hotel room and they've got all this heavy luggage, and I was hoping it would have, M16 assault rifles in it. It doesn't. It sort of is a sequel to Mr. and Mrs. Smith in a way, because it's so nakedly autobiographical. It's quite interesting. It's quite an ambitious film,
Yes.
actually. It's quite a serious film. And in terms of pastiche and style and genre, it is interesting that she has faked up a kind of late 60s kind of agonised ennui marriage drama. It's a bit like the film Two for the Road, Stanley Donen's Two for the Road, with Albert Finney and Audrey Hepburn, going through marital agony in the south of France. And there are other bits of it that seem to be taken a bit from Antonioni, a little bit, or from Plein Soleil in some bits. It's not, it's not unambitious, it's not uninteresting by any means. The only thing I would say about it is that this is Angelina Jolie's third outing as a director, but I think what's important is her first time directing herself, and I think she kind of neglects to direct herself. She just looks like a bit of a mannequin.
Yeah, she's a total clothes horse, a sort of angsty clothes horse.
Yeah, as if she's simply on Mogadon and she's very, very depressed and she does nothing at all. Whereas I think Brad Pitt is doing a little bit more, and that actually might not reflect so badly on Angelina Jolie. She might be directing him more. So it is a little absurd, to be honest with you, but the one thing I would say is that we spend our lives complaining about a lack of chemistry between male and female principals in movies. And for better or worse, I think Brad and Angelina kind of do have a a bit of chemistry.
Which isn't a given, isn't it?
No,
that a real-life married couple would have chemistry on screen.
But they kind of have almost a little bit of sort of Burton and Taylor kind of little bit of Needle going on. And it's not without interest. So it's not a turkey, this film, by any means. I don't think it quite works. But it's a kind of an honourable failure in a way, much more than I thought.
She's at least trying for something here, even though what she's trying for is lifting from a lot of other sources.
Yeah, she's read a lot of Edward Albee and she's read a lot of Richard Yates, but I think this is better than Honourable Failure. I actually rather enjoyed this. I thought the tone was very strange, much more strange than you'd expect from the people behind it. And I think as soon as she takes a step back from things like Unbroken and In the Land of Blood and Honey, that was the first one, wasn't it? Those are very broad, very epic, ambitious projects to be working with.
And a bit anonymous. This isn't anonymous.
And I think the thing you can say that is absolutely uncategorically bad about this film is the script, and it's written by Angelina Jolie, so that's a massive failing. There's a lot of lines of dialogue in it which are just awful, like "Stop, Nessa, stop." Brad Pitt seems to say this every 10 minutes.
Are we ever going to talk about it? Nessa? Do you hate me?
The acting's great. They're both very good actors. I think the point is that she's supposed to be a drugged up mannequin for most of it, which is kind of a giant thing for a big Hollywood star to do. It's just to give themselves nothing to do other than look a bit Sophia Loren draped around her in lots of nightwear.
Is it a vanity project or is that a kind of moot point?
I think that's a moot point. I would agree with Henry. I think we don't necessarily have to look at it in terms of a vanity project. I mean, it's a personal project. I think the stuff about children, I think that's a little bit cliche, the idea of, uh-oh, no kids, sterility alert, I think that's a little bit, been there and done that. And it's slightly, and also there's something in sexual political terms, a little bit reactionary, frankly. I get what Henry's saying about the fact that, she's supposed to be clinically depressed, but I think a film has to somehow get inside that a bit more, other than just her standing there looking depressed in front of the camera. I think you have to find some way of getting under the skin, and I'm not sure that she directed a way of getting under her own character's skin, whereas she did with Brad Pitt, who was a very sympathetic character. I have to say, you're right, it's a personal project, it has a real flavour, and it's quite a classy attempt. I'm not sure that I buy it, but I'd rather watch this again than either of the other two.
Me too.
You want to hurt me?
You're nothing.
Hurt me.
Come on. Just stop.
And a Jolie Pittmas, one and all. Let's now turn from the high life to the low life, and specifically to the homelessness drama Hector, directed by Jake Gavin and starring Peter Mullen. And it looks like this.
Come and say, then.
Haunted by ghosts, harried by demons, Hector McAdam lives rough around the A-roads of southern Scotland.
Take some details from you. We'll try and find you a better one of the other centres. No, I come here every year.
He wants to go home for Christmas, but where's home exactly? He shrugged off his siblings and found a new family of sorts at a London shelter.
Trying my best to find you.
Hector!
Yeah, but I couldn't come.
Hector, you all right?
Henry, the handling may be a bit cloying and crude at times, but I always applaud a subject like this being tackled on screen.
Yeah, I like Hector because I like Hector, and I like Hector because I like Peter Mullen, and it's kind of getting a bit redundant to say that Peter Mullen is great, but he's great in this, and for once not playing a boozy, violent psycho who's really harrowed and troubled, actually playing a fairly optimistic, fairly nice guy that's gone through an awful tough time.
Yeah.
And that is both this film's strength and its weakness, because once you get to the shelter after the initial opening tragedy setup, it's remarkably cuddly for a homeless shelter. There's an amazing amount of staffing. There's free clothes coming off the walls.
Welshmen's choir.
Welshmen's choir. Seconds of
food
breakfast,
fight.
Food fight. Tea for everyone.
It's like St. Trinian's.
Chumley mates in the shape of Keith Allen. It is really. I mean, it makes homelessness look really, really pleasant.
I'll get some tea.
Get around him, Ted. Good lad. Go on, I'll have milk and sugars.
Same for me.
Let's just on milk and 3 sugars.
I didn't dislike it too much because of that, but I did wonder about it being, for a social realist film, if it's particularly real.
It does. I think I agree that it kind of falls apart a little bit when it does get to London. I loved all those early scenes though. I love that kind of evocative sense of Scotland, and that sense of the A-roads and the petrol stations and the car parks and the underpasses and the rain always falling. That was really, really well done and kind of properly bleak and melancholic.
Spending the night in the bog.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think I'm a sucker for slide guitars. They're like the Psalm of David for me. Like you put a slide guitar on anything and it kind of lures me in.
One lonely man limping down the M6.
I kind of respond to that.
Yeah, I wonder why.
I wonder why.
Yeah, I mean, there's something romantic about it in that sense as well, like the lonely traveller, the guy travelling to escape his grief, which is, again, all quite cliched, but done really well. And, and an amazing supporting cast as well for a first-time director. You've got Gina McKee in there, who's really great.
Stephen Tompkinson.
They're not big parts, but they're meaningful parts. And so, it's a very well-meaning, very quiet, gentle film. One that you probably shouldn't attack too much for not being political enough. I don't think that's what the director was going for. But in an era when Ken Loach is talking about conscious cruelty of the Tory government, the fact that food banks are now leading hunger to be used as a weapon against people, you do wonder sometimes about British films coming out like this that don't really seem to address that problem at all.
It becomes a sort of parable, doesn't it?
It does a little bit, and you have the things like the drifting shots of all the homeless people asleep, and they're playing a Silent Night, I think, over the top. And you think, well, it's not exactly an advert for the Tory government, but there's something here that's a little off.
Sleigh bells ring, and I love to sing the songs of Christmas for you. Sitting by the fire, holding along.
Peter Mullen in search of redemption in Hector. Time now for a genuine oddity, effectively 17 stories for the price of one. Close your eyes and follow that din. You're about to enter the forbidden room.
Sorry, did you steal my boar's head?
Yes?
Canadian artist Guy Maddin and co-director Evan Johnson roll in from the ether to tell us that the world is open and gaping, full of hidden pockets and burrows and refashioned silent screen B-movies, all folding and tumbling over one another. Mathieu Malric and Charlotte Rampling are among the myriad actors getting lost in the mix.
We haven't surfaced in months. We need food, we need oxygen.
Peter, it risks getting exasperating, but you really need to kind of give in and immerse yourself in this
You
one.
do. I think you need to go beyond exasperation, really, with Guy Maddin. I myself have been beyond exasperation and round the back and up again. I don't know what to say. It's a fantastic piece of work, and I really enjoyed it. I think it's the sort of thing you really need to see on the big screen. It's an incredible installation style event. I've been agnostic about Guy Maddin in the past. This has sort of convinced me a bit, mostly. If you've never seen a Guy Maddin film before, then see this one and don't see anything else. Because if you see all the rest of them and you realise it's all like that all the time, and they can go on for 20 minutes or they could go on for 24 hours and it sort of doesn't make any difference.
It's sort of playful candy floss whimsy.
It's a little bit like that. And I worry that by fetishizing, however brilliantly and however imaginatively, the tropes and incidentals of early cinema, silent cinema, early talkies, and the way in which the celluloid stock has been degraded. It's sort of brilliant, but on the other hand, there's something a bit disingenuous about it because you're ironising it and making it postmodern and in fact setting to one side the fact that the point about those early entertainments was their sincerity and simplicity. They wouldn't know what you were talking about if you said, oh, it's not about linear narrative. Of course it's about linear narrative. That's how silent cinema got to be big, not by challenging linear narrative.
And if it's on one level a love letter to those films, it still feels a little bit ironised.
It is a bit ironised for me. But having said that, through his sheer energy and persistence and unflagging resourcefulness and ingenuity, he has moulded it into a kind of speaking voice of his own. I mean, it's his dream speak, early neo-cinema speak, which has genuinely a kind of voice of its own, and it really is kind of compelling, and you really are swept along with it. And it is genuinely very funny sometimes. There are some hilarious things in it with the woodsman worrying and arguing about who it is that's going to rescue Margot from the centre of her pink cave. And there's some outrageous, almost Python-esque bits in it I thought were great. You do need to suspend your disbelief and you have to indulge it. But there's no doubt about it. It is of a piece. It really doesn't look like anything else, despite the fact that it's a pastiche of something else. It's his own style. And if you've never seen it before, then yes, by all means, go and see it, and go and see it on the big screen, because this is a real kind of cinephile event. If you approach it as a piece of art, as an experimental, open-minded, open-hearted, open-ended art project, then you find yourself going with it. You find yourself thinking, well, yes, this is weird and wonderful, and I do like it after all. So that, I think, is the way to approach it.
They have Margot, and who knows what they're doing to her. We all have our axes and our brawn. Strong men. We just have to get together and attack.
Guy Maddin's infuriating, intoxicating The Forbidden Room. But we end the week's show with a bona fide family Christmas movie engineered by a pair of boisterous hostesses in Tina Fey and Amy Poehler. Here they are as sisters. On the cusp of middle age, siblings Kate and Maura are finally preparing to say goodbye to the family home. But they want to bow out with a bang, to see it off with a flourish. So they've invited all their old friends for a big farewell party. By the end of the night, the house is in ruins and important life lessons are learned. Henry, the success or failure of this film is probably partly dependent on how much you like Tina and Amy.
Might be a tiny little bit, yeah. This is basically token off the same bong as Neighbours, the Zac Efron. Zac Efron? Yeah, Zac Efron and Seth Rogen comedy, which I think was known as Bad Neighbours here. In that it takes an awful long time to get to the house party, which is the main showpiece of the whole thing. And once it does, you can kind of see the jokes coming from a country mile off. And that's fine, you know, not all comedy has to be massively original, but if you're not a huge fan of Tina Fey and you're not a huge fan of Amy Poehler, which I'm not, I like them, I think they're funny, not particularly convinced by their genius as such, it's very difficult to really find every single scrap of this really, really funny, particularly the funny dance routines and the various flirting with various guys. The main problem for me was that Tina Fey's character just doesn't seem right for her. Like, she's this almost Bostonian, brash woman who doesn't know where her life's going and what to do with it, and she just doesn't play that very convincingly for someone who's an exec producer on so much comedy, has an amazingly funny TV show. She really does, you know, like she is the person in power in comedy at the moment, and for me that casting doesn't really work so well. The setups aren't that great, and then the main message of the film, that you never really grow up, that you're always going to need somebody to remind you that responsibilities are there for you in life. It's not particularly original, and I think it's been done better before. So I didn't really have that much fun in this, I'm afraid to say, and I think Peter's about to contradict me completely.
I think he is.
Right.
I mean, if
I am a bit. I don't know. I mean, I'm a huge Tina and Amy fan, and I did really enjoy this. I agree with you. They clearly made a conscious decision to reverse the typecasting because in their earlier film, rather good film, overlooked film called Baby Mama, where it was Amy playing the irresponsible one, and of course Tina being the obvious kind of bespectacled, you know, the designated driver figure. She played the sensible one, and they've clearly made a choice to switch that. But I didn't have a problem with it. I thought their shtick is always very funny for me. They're the queens of show business. They come on and they radiate professional show business comedy,
if we've had
and I love it.
Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie as the sort of Burton Taylor, they've almost become like the Bob Hope and Bing Crosby.
They are kind of, yeah. I mean, but they have got. I mean, one hesitates to pompously invoke the Bechdel test, but until very recently, the idea of two women playing together in a comedy was considered almost physically sort of gravitationally impossible. It couldn't work, and yet they make it work all the time without you even thinking about it. I quite like the kidulthood stuff. I quite like the idea that their kids' bedrooms have been left as horrific shrines. They have left them absolutely untouched. And I like the idea that their teenage selves are always there, this horrible kind of Mr. Hyde inside each of them, and they just regress to it passionately. I mean, a lot of comedies now are about reunions. The reunion, the high school reunion, the college reunion, the flashback scene, the prequel flashback scene is now an almost must in comedy now to get the people to, and now it's odd that they didn't do it. This isn't the edgiest material, I've got to say. But I thought it was funny. I laughed. I sat back, I relaxed, I laughed, and what else did you want from it? I didn't want anything else from it.
Henry wanted more.
Well,
Henry always wants more.
If you don't like it, that's fine. I get that.
I think we've got to get over the Bechdel thing. I think we have to.
Yeah.
I mean, like Maya Rudolph, who's in this as well, and she's great in it as ever.
I wish she had more to do though. She's so good,
and she is so good, and you know, she's got a class that matches Faye's in many ways.
It's a pretty cliched caricature role.
It really is, and that's the problem with this film, right? She gave an interview to Tom Lamont last week's Observer, saying, essentially saying, stop talking about us as women comedians, talk about us as comedians.
I hope there's nothing to do with political correctness. I genuinely think they are. Still, I mean, of course, it's possible they will come up with a bad movie. But so far as it happens, I think Tina and Amy's are kind of better.
It's a lot of underteat, but I think I'm getting away with it.
It's on backwards.
I don't get this dress. One of my apples keeps rolling out of the bag. But I like the story it tells with the fringe. Oh, here we go.
Ending the show on a discordant note, that's the party comedy Sisters. And that's it from us. My thanks to Peter and to Henry. Christmas comes early next week when we shall be casting an eye over the new Star Wars film. And trust me, you ain't seen nothing until you've seen Peter wearing his homemade Jar Jar Binks costume. All that to look forward to. We're back. Same time, same place.